Madam Chair of the Board of the American Scandinavian Foundation, participants of the Commission of the Status of Women, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank the American Scandinavian Foundation for co-hosting this event today. What would be a more appropriate venue for such an event than this Nordic House in central Manhattan? The Nordic Council of Ministers has worked actively to develop and promote equal treatment of men and women, girls and boys in the Nordic societies since it was set up in the early 70s. This cooperation has been and is still of mutual benefit for the Nordic countries. We work together in order to enhance these very important issues, and we use each other's knowledge and initiate political debates in order to develop the understanding of gender equality in our region. And with today's event, we mark the 40th anniversary of the cooperation in the field of gender equality in the Nordic region. The topic to be discussed by experts here today, breaking stereotypes when choosing education and profession, is very suitable in the sense that the Nordic countries have been focusing on gender equality in education as well as gender equality on the labor market since the official cooperation of gender equality began in 1974. And there are good reasons for it. There are some very strong stereotypes out there. Thanks for the update on the US. We will hear more about the update on the Nordic countries. But when I was reflecting on this opening speech, I was reminded of an old grandma saying that became a hit in 1968. And I am so old so I can remember 1968. I remember a few things happened that year. I don't remember exactly this hit, but I was reminded of it. And it says, girls can't do what the guys do and still be a lady. And I think that really captures the topic of today. Girls can't do what the guys do and still be a lady. And we could turn it around and vice versa, ask what is proper for the boys to do. And challenging these stereotypes is really challenging this old grandma saying. And in the Nordic countries, we see that the labor market is still clearly gender segregated, and the payment gap between women and men remains. This affects the power and the ability of women and men to shape society, as well as shaping their lives. Women and men should be secured real equal opportunities concerning both the choice of education and profession, and the real equal opportunities to take part in work life. Today's seminar will touch on gender segregation in the Nordic countries in both education and labor market context. These two are strongly interlinked, of course, and under the impact of gender stereotypes. In order to break the gender stereotypes and to change the game, sincere and active work is required. In international rankings, such as the World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap, the Nordic countries rank high when it comes to women in the labor market. One of the reasons for this is often considered what we now call the parental leave. It was maternity leave when I became a father for the first time. I remember very well the issue at home was my wife had finished her education, I had not. We were there with two newborn babies, twins, and it was fairly obvious for us that after her 3 months she would return to her job and I would take over at home. Well, at that time, this is 32 years ago, that explains the gray hair. At that time there were no such thing as paternal leave. It was maternal leave. There was no rights, for men. And the stereotypes were quite strong. So when I told my friends what I was going to do, they said, "Oh yes, really?" But I was pretty sure that this was not only a practical and good economic solutions for my family, but it was a huge opportunity for myself that I didn't know would it ever come back. I'm very happy to see that the game has changed in this area. Today it's not only an opportunity, it's not only a right, but it also, with few differences between the countries, it's also something that you're strongly encouraged by the regulations themselves to do economically. And I believe that many of those fathers that make use of their opportunities, they have the same experience as I had without those rights. I would never have done differently. It was a very, very special opportunity. But still, the eyebrows are raised when men choose differently than the stereotypes tell them to. When women choose differently than the stereotypes tell them to. We know that gender segregated labor market is preceded by gender segregated educational choices. Active work with gender equality in education at all levels is necessary in order to give both boys and girls the same competencies, and in order for boys and girls to complete their education without gender-based competencies and knowledge. Society needs different knowledge, different experiences, and cannot afford a certain type of knowledge and a variety of competencies depending on gender. Gender stereotypes limits a person's full potential, and it narrows the possibilities to choose, but it also makes the workplace and the society to a poorer place. We know that stereotypes still have a very high impact on children when they choose education and profession. In the Nordic countries, more women than men have third-level education, and that is very good. But the choices are still highly gender segregated, which is not good at all. The male dominance in the STEM area, science, technology, engineering, and math, and with women dominating in the field of education and health and welfare, as well as teacher training and education. This was made clear in the report State of the Nordic Union from January 2014. The fact that more women than men have third-level education is, however, not reflected in the amount of women in board positions in the private sector as well as other sectors in the Nordic region. And also, social attitudes have not kept up with the steady increase of women with third-level education. It's still the woman who is expected to have the primary responsibility for the care in the home and the children and the elderly. Working actively with gender equality in preschools and schools can be a method to break this pattern, and that has been a focus for the Nordic Council of Ministers. It deserves mentioning in this forum that a report on sustainable work for gender equality in preschools and schools in the Nordic countries was initiated in 2013 by the Nordic Council of Ministers. And the report shows that including gender equality in preschools and schools steering documents result in schools actually working actively with gender equality. And I think this illustrates that you need to go to the roots of the problem. You need to start early, and you need to change the concepts and expectations of both genders to their futures and their choices. We have experts here to talk more about these issues. So why should I go more into it? The right thing to do now is to say to all of you again, welcome. Thank you for taking time. Thank you for choosing this event among all the thousands of events going on in this city right now. I am sure you will have a good experience. And to lead us through this expert discussion, We have a moderator who is representing the Icelandic presidency of the Nordic Council this year, Ms. Rosa Gudrun Erlingsdottir. I give the floor to you.
In Iceland, as in the other Nordic countries, we have been working in a special task force which has representatives from the organization of the social partners and the government. And I know that the other Nordic countries have had similar working groups in the recent years. In some of these groups there has been experts from the academia as well, and one of the bases of our achievements concerning gender equality is because of this cooperation between all partners, between the social partners, between the governments, and not the least experts from academia. And they are here with us. We have experts from that field, experts of gender equality, working within the administrations, within politics, and from academia. And I don't want to take too much time talking, and want to introduce the speakers so that we will have time for discussion afterwards. But I would like to point out that this event can be followed at Twitter, #EqualNordic, and we will follow the order on the folder which was distributed, and we will start with Mrs. Helga Aune from Norway. She's a postdoctoral researcher at the Department of Public and International Law from the University of Oslo. Welcome.
I'm here starting with a few facts about the Norwegian setting. And it is only to put the underlying topic of gender stereotypes in a setting so that you all can put it in your own settings. Like Dagfinn said, we have a highly gender-divided employment market. We have typical male and typical female professions, dominated professions. We pride ourselves with a high employment rate of 67%. If you look at the age of young children, the parents were even working 85%. At the same time, it's a fact that 40% of all employed women work part-time, and that figure has stayed stable for the last 40 years with a drop of 3-4%. And you have to question, why is that? Research tells us that it is the good mother norm, which is the reason. In certain areas of Norway, the good notion of the good mother is so strong that hardly anyone dare work full-time. At the same time, it's reflected in education. Gender-divided choices. Girls choose education so that in future time, perhaps can work part-time in case they have children. That way of thinking, it's a personal choice. On the other hand, you have employers in the female-dominated professions, and it is arranged so it's hardly possible to work full-time if you want. So it's a circle. But fortunately in Norway, the self-perception, even though Dagfinn Høybråten and the Nordic Council has put a lot of attention to the gender equality work done, but we pride ourselves with gender equality is already in place, so we don't have to work that actively with gender equality. We have free choice. But if we break down the facts, as a group for disabled, still employed women, 40% will be working full-time, 60% part-time, while the figures are almost quite the opposite for employed disabled men. If you look at the dropout rates of vocational high schools, you see that Norwegian children born with immigrant parents, the boys have a dropout rate of 38% and the girls 22%. It's a major gender-specific difference. If you look at the fact that the choice of education is taken at the age as early as 12, 13 years. Me starting off as a labor law lawyer and researcher, writing my PhD in labor law on part-time work, it's impossible to not look at the gender aspect. What also research shows is that there is no systematic work on gender equality in kindergartens and schools. We have spread projects, individual started off in different kindergartens and schools, but as in general, national level, no systemic work. The stereotypical gender roles limits the individual room for action. And by passing on gender stereotypes, we provide the inner barriers, the boundaries, limiting ourselves. We internalize that women should not be direct, outspoken, and powerful, taking too much space in the room. And boys must not be too involved in feminine activities as care work. But this is time changing, but as already said, it limits the room of choices for both genders. Who defines the stereotypes? We know a lot about that. The politicians do in the legislative design. Do they have a holistic approach? Do the laws pull in the same direction? Or do they hit each other in the head, pulling two different ways? The father's quota is one sign that of legislative techniques really changing the people's attitudes. During the last political election campaign this fall, the father's quota was strongly protected by the employers' unions. They are still necessary to have, don't take them away. Most likely, we will have equal service for the military, equal duty to serve for men and young women and young men starting from the fall of 2016. It's a major revolution. We are expected to serve equal on all areas of society. The social partners play an important role. Sports, we have seen different prices for men and women in cross-country skiing. The Vasa Lap made major headlines. The man was giving a car, the woman was not. Until finally a car sales dealer thought it was a good thing to give away a car. We need to talk about religious beliefs and the cultural understandings. Each group have to address their own stereotypes. Like a Norwegian Pakistani lady told me, I am so proud. I have 3 daughters, 2 medical doctors and 1 dentist. And I have 3 cab drivers. And of course, that does something to their family dynamics. How does these daughters talk with their boys? They earn a lot more money. They are used to being in charge. So people are interested in talking about these issues. I've already said who can change the stereotypes. That is mentioned. But it's important to talk so that you understand that the owners of the structures, and by the structures, I mean the companies, the providers of services, the kindergartens, the schools. But how do you force the owners of the structures? Well, being a lawyer, I have a big trust in the legal system. And we have a reporting duty in the Gender Equality Act. We have tied it to the company annual report. That piece of legislation needs to be further developed. But it is awareness. It's an important issue. It's put on the table. However, law is not to be put in practice by lawyers. It's non-lawyers who do the job. the teachers, the administrative staff, the administrative staffs. What does it mean to work with gender equality? We have to talk about it. The noisy ones, the active ones, they're sent out to play, to release the energy. While the calm and more mature, that means the girls, they get to work with preschool tasks. One group is losing out on basic knowledge, skills, competence, if this becomes the regular pattern. This is what gender equality is about. And this leads me to my private little project with 6 kindergartens in Oslo schools, Oslo's kindergartens. And it's a still ongoing project. It takes time, educating the staff about the legal platform for gender equality, democracy and inclusion. I need to discuss the different cultures' ideas about gender equality. And it is very challenging to create that secure setting to talk about these issues. And then, of course, gender equality with our little group of children. What does it mean? Are boys and girls treated the same way? Do they get the same challenges? Also, it has been necessary to have parent meetings to make parents understand that lack of gender equality affect their sons' and daughters' right to education and self-sufficiency. And it's not a shock. Most parents want education for their children. If gender equality provides certain skills necessary in the education system, most are all for it. Girls need to have physical ownership of a room. Boys need to have the ability to pay attention and strengthen the emotional language. As Facebook language says, lean in, both to family, both to work. So, almost the last slide is about the necessities. We need teachers training in gender equality law, that people need to know the legal basis. Then it makes it easy to understand what this is about. We need curriculum to be written on equality and anti-discrimination. And the responsibility needs to be stuck on somebody's tail. The owners of the schools need to be prove fulfillment of the legal requirement. We do need inspection, guidance, control, and sanctions when lack of fulfillment. We have that experience. And the city of committee needs to control the state. Very important. And here is a beautiful painting. The tree symbolizes the society. We have the old man, the wise man, passing on the wisdom and knowledge to the young boy. But we are also in desperate need of new paintings for a new time. We lack a wise old woman and young girls under that tree. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Helga, and thank you for addressing the question of the legal responsibility and the ownership of this responsibility of all partners. And we were discussing earlier this morning the paradox which lies in that we have had equality laws for almost 40 years now, based, oriented towards solutions in the labor market, but still we have one of the most gender segregated labor markets in the world. So let's move on to Denmark. From Denmark we have an expert, Nanna Højlund. She's a vice president of the Women's Council in Denmark, and she's also a union official in the trade and labor.
My little presentation here will have a kind of different view on the question from what Helga was talking about, but still there will be some similarities, and especially regarding the question of how society looks. There is so much in common between Norway and Denmark regarding the labor market. So we just start on just pointing out that in Denmark, we are very interested in getting men and young boys to start education in the sector of healthcare, the whole sector of healthcare. There is different kind of education. There's nurse, and then we have big healthcare education system where you work especially with sick people, elderly people, or disabled people. And this is the area that I will be talking from today. But first, the Danish labor market is highly gender segregated. It appears as one of the most gender segregated labor markets in the EU. 6 out of 10 people actually work in sector-dominated occupations. So most people work with the same gender as themselves. And this put up a certain picture of what you are going to choose when you choose education or if you choose a job. You know that there's a big chance for you to work with your own gender if you choose certain kind of education. If we look at the education that I work with on a daily basis, then is 1 out of 12 students and on the vocational, social, and healthcare education are men. Only 1 out of 12. And in the union where I work daily, in that area we have about 50% of our members is working in the healthcare sector, and 95% of them, the members in my union in that area, are women. And just 1 in 10 carpenter students is a woman. So when it comes to vocational education, there's really a big gender segregation. And this segregation has very long and historical roots. I think that also, if we look at it in a time perspective, then there has been a very little change. Things don't change. People still get the same kind of jobs and work in the same sector. And there has been this, over time, there's been many efforts made, especially on making men choose other kind of education. And right now there's a big discussion about this in Denmark, very much to do with the crisis and the fact that the labor market is changing. Many vocational jobs where you used to have a vocational education as a young man are now disappearing. They are moving out of the country, and we need a new kind of labor market for this group. And every time that happens, it has happened many times over years that there have been this kind of changes, then there's always this look at how can we make men choose to work in another sector than they're used to. And then I think it's very important to look on how gender is created as a part of individual men's and women's development of identity in relation to work. And that has been something that have been ongoing as there's been many ways of looking at how they are making the way into the educational system. And even though gender is not longer seen as something essential, but as something we do, there are still certain notions in society of what is masculine and what is feminine, and what a man and a woman should be like, almost like in the song. The image constructed of women and men is a dichotomy, and it really point out that male qualities will be addressed higher than feminine qualities in our society. Men are good at working with what we call the hard facts and in the industrial and in technical areas, and women do, I think yesterday when we had also a meeting in the Nordic ministries, it was called the soft area. And I don't like that word too much because I think it itself creates a kind of gender way of looking at the labor market. But it means that most work tasks and jobs are known as either feminine or masculine, and therefore are either suited for men or women. And this also means that the gendering is not given in advance. It's a social construction, and it can change. And I think that's something maybe in Denmark where we could learn a little from the work that's been going on in Norway and Sweden and Finland, because we are not talking so much about this in Denmark as you are in the other Nordic countries. Many different campaigns, though, has been made, and I have been working in this area for 10 years, and I have seen a lot of campaigns that's tried to approach men and talked about how good it could be to work in this area. And nothing has changed. Men still seek the same jobs, and women seek the same jobs. And maybe it's time to look on the maybe we also have to look on the way we address men with the gendered perceptions of why they should choose to be a social and healthcare worker. Many times we tell them you can be a leader or you can work with techniques. In other words, we talk about something besides a job. We don't talk about being a social and healthcare worker. And I think the question is how we can attract men without reproducing the dichotomy understanding of men and women, and then in that way also putting the female work down. That's very important for me. Some years ago, we had the chance in the union where I work to be part of a PhD made by a Danish scientist, he must be. Now he's working in the Institute for Human Rights in Denmark, called Ken Warming. And he did a lot of interviewing with men regarding this question. And I think it was so important to really hear what the men were telling themselves. One of the really important things was that men who have been employed in the care sector has often been employed in traditional male jobs, and the career change was initiated by the liberating rejection of this former job. They often hear about the possibilities of working in the care sector through personal relations or random circumstances, and really rarely was it any kind of formal career guidance. And I think that's a very important notice, because it means that the formal career guidance look at men in a certain way and don't give them any directions in the area of, for instance, social and healthcare work. Men are attracted, if you ask them, primarily to the work content in the sector, and they're really emphasizing the possibilities to work with people and make a difference. And if we go out and ask women, we don't do that often because they come to the sector by themselves, but if we do, I'm pretty sure they will answer the question the same way. They want to work with people and they want to make a difference. But men also emphasizes working condition in terms of family-friendly work culture, and some cases they also talk about decisive in relation to their choices. So just to conclude a little bit here in the end, I think it's important that we learn, when we want to make these changes, that we do not necessarily have to address men with gender's perception of why they should choose to be a social and healthcare worker in order to attract them to the social and healthcare work. Men chooses the work mainly because of the work content and the working conditions. But what we could do instead is make a more sustainable career guidance, work to eliminate the pay difference. That is something men talk a lot about. Why go to a labor market where the pay is so low, and also their lack of full-time jobs? So that is something that could be addressed here if we really wanted men also to be in this area. And then work to make career work less related to the feminine and the female. And then I will just tell a very short story about this area. 5 years ago, we started there is a movement in Denmark about every vocational education goes to the skill competition, where the best carpenter, the best plumber, the best cook is end up being the one with the medal. And this social and healthcare education also wanted to join. And everybody asked us, why? You have nothing to show up. What will you show? Have you anything to show to other people? Who wants to see someone make the bed? Today we are part of this competition, and it's been really a big thing the last years, seeing this develop in our country into really young people being so proud of what they're doing. We have actors on the stage acting out like sick people, elderly people, and you see them work with them on stage. And I think there is something about this invisibility of this profession. And maybe we should put up some more visibility of what's really going on in this area to show people that this work is so much more and it's a true profession. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Nana, for your examples from Denmark. You pointed out too many similarities between Denmark and Iceland. And I wanted to grab the opportunity and tell you a little example from Iceland, because we are doing this work I referred to earlier. And we had a meeting, an open meeting, and discussions about men in the occupations of the kindergartens and preschools and as teachers and nurses. And one of our panelists was asked, why did you choose this occupation? I mean, the pay is so low. And he said, well, that decision wasn't the most bad decision I have taken financially. I liked the job because I wanted to work with small children. And he accepted the low pay. And very few women raised this question, as he did. Now he will take the Icelandic contribution to the European Song Contest this year. And his song is called No Prejudice. But let us move on to my home country, to an expert from the University of Iceland. Her name is Berglind Rós Magnúsdóttir, and she's an assistant professor at the School of Education. And she has titled her presentation, Gender and Care Work in a Carefree Neoliberal Market.
In my presentation, I decided to look at gendered educational choices in a rather wide perspective and consider it in which direction current dominant policies are shaping our landscape of choices, ethics, and values. In that perspective, I especially want to discuss care work, both in terms of informal presentation of care at home and in families, and about care work as a vital part of professions. In recent global policies on state service institutions, the division between the masculine codes of instrumentality and rationality, and then the feminine codes of care and emotions, has been exaggerated, and the masculine codes have started to dominate caring part of professionalism. The professions, as teaching and nursing, have been dominated by women because care is culturally rooted in femininity, but through recent social policies, care has been marginalized as an important entity of professionalism. As in a marketized education and health system, there is a growing need for attractiveness, so the individuals with the most symbolic values want to choose to become a part of the sector. Masculine codes are more valued and are an integral part of the audit culture, and therefore professions have started to strive for developing in that direction. In this neoliberal market, we can say that the aim of education is very simple. It is just to produce human capital for economic success. And actually, the focus in neoliberalism on individual choice sets up failure as the fault of the individual who has not taken advantage of the openings of offer, rather than looking to it being a consequence of structural inequalities such as social class, ethnicity, and gender. In these current policies, the individual is made responsible for her social position and activity to promote herself, and education is reduced to employability, self-worth to market worth, citizens to consumers, and social solidarity to self-interest. The state must construct itself in market terms. The market replaces the society. And we get a rather different understanding of quality in educational institutions. There will be a constant focus on efficiency, and organizational image of quality can be at the cost of practice, relating to philosophical principles like social justice and gender equity. Some faculties in Icelandic universities have expanded enormously as business and engineering faculties, while humanities are struggling to survive. The perceived ideas of quality are shaped by the accumulated symbolic capitals of those who choose certain service of education. Males and middle-class preferences related to knowledge economy have higher symbolic capitals than females and working-class preferences in education, like care or vocational sectors. More students of all genders, then, tend to aspire more to male-dominated professions and exaggerates differentiation based on gender, ability, race, and social class. The fact that fewer students than before choose sectors marked with femininity is not based on rational examination of the quality of the education. On the contrary, it's based on the higher symbolic capital of masculinity and middle-classness. We then get a more careless form of competitive individualism. It downgrades professions of care, while there is increasing need for nursing and care in schools due to increased inequality and economic crisis in advanced neoliberal economies. In Iceland is of course on its way to more careless economy that devolve more need for taking care of social problems to the education system and simultaneously decrease state expenditure to schools. From the year of Bancroft 2008 to 12, student-teacher ratio in upper secondary schools has increased along with teachers' additional work. Programs in upper secondary schools have been implemented for diverse group of people who lost their employability after the crisis without hiring more teachers. And the annual teacher's salary is among the lowest in the OECD countries, despite the fact that all teachers need to have a master's degree. And then we should look at the early experience of our people, because it's vital for boys, if they are going to choose to work in the care sector later in life, that they have some sort of early experience of care work. And as we can see in Iceland, babysitting is a common summer job for girls, but a very uncommon summer occupation for boys. Nearly half of the respondents undertook term time work along with the schoolwork. 1/3 of the term time workers were classified as high intensity workers, meaning they worked more than 12 hours a week. And we are talking about 13 to 17 years old. And only one boy reported that he worked as a babysitter during school terms. And then a little older, we have also a research on an interview study with 11 male nurses and nursing students. And in Iceland, male nurses have been and still are very few. Þórður Kristinsson conducted an interview study with 11 male nurses and nursing students. And they actually strive to make nursing sound masculine by emphasizing distance, rationality, and objectivity, and de-emphasizing care in the discussion about the profession. At that time, in 2004, men comprised just over 1% of the nursing population in Iceland. And the results of these studies are in line with the careless global discourse, which downgrades or silences care as an important ability and competence in care sector professions. There have been concerns among nurse associations all over the world about this declining interest and respect in nursing and other care sectors. And actually, as you can see on these photos, this was apparent in an Icelandic campaign held in 2003 that had the aim of gaining more people to choose nursing for higher education. As you can see, these photos have any common nurturing or caregiving view of the job. And then a little bit about the unpaid care sector. There is not only a well-established gender ceiling in terms of power and privilege, but also a care ceiling. The more power and prestige the less care, both formally and informally. As an example, the more prestigious universities are experienced as having a colder and more distant atmosphere. The growth of neoliberal policies has exacerbated the impact of the care ceiling, as those who are perceived as quality workers and quality students are supposed to work 24/7 and are not supposed to spend time taking care of others, like children, elderly, or disabled. At the same time, there is an attack on welfare systems, and work which was previously payable became voluntary work, or is simply referred to as individual responsibility. The weakening of welfare systems in recent years has pushed more highly educated women in Iceland and everywhere into volunteering or unpaid care work to secure the next generation production of the rational and competent individual. Formally, the state's responsibility, welfare, is devolved to the community, to the family, the individual, and private enterprise. We can see on this slide some information gained from a PhD research conducted in the US about the middle classes and their educational choices for themselves and their children. It became apparent through interviews with 59 adults that concerning choices of place or choices of location within US, the women tended to follow their husbands, despite the fact that on average, women in my data had similar levels of education as men. The male career seemed more important, economically more secure, or culturally more prestigious than the females, with the women taking the main responsibility for the unpaid care work. And then the conclusion. The studies on youth in Iceland highlight two important points in this discussion. Firstly, Icelanders prepare themselves quite young for the competitive, careless neoliberal market and are scheduled for about 60 to 70 hours per week altogether for work, school, and leisure activities. Secondly, the gendered notion of care work as a feminine practice is very strong in early age. Masculinity and femininity are constructed as dichotomies where care and emotions are put against the masculine distance and rationality. All of the interviewees in the studies of males in the care sectors had in common some experience of care work prior to their choice of the field. If there are so few boys who experience care work at an early age, it does indeed decrease the likelihood of taking the step into such profession. However, when located in the caring sector, most of them feel a strong need for distancing themselves from the discourse on care as a practice. But of course, then we need to pay attention to the values that are the main drive for careless discourse in policies and power relations and eliminate them. And it's vital to celebrate care as practice and competence for own and the common good in curriculum and educational practice. We have to get more males into teaching and nursing without devalue care work or leave such work with the female professionals. Be aware of the reproduction of ideas through neoliberal education policies that devalue gender codes, which are typically associated with the feminine. And remain a strong welfare system to prevent increase in unpaid gender-divided care work. In some countries, women's unpaid care work is the welfare system. And lastly, provide further understanding of the complicated process of choosing, as individuals remain to have problems with degendering, deracing, and declassing themselves when choosing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Berglind. It's hard to say, but in a way you can be thankful for the economic crisis if the result is research like your own, because it's very important for us to see these results and to learn from them. Our next speaker is from Sweden, and that's Miriam Norfors. She's a political advisor to Marianne Arnholm, the Swedish Minister for Gender Equality. The floor is yours.
Being the only one in the panel who is actually not a politician but working in politics, my presentation will focus a lot on what can be done and what I see the possible solutions to be from now, like in the future. I will start up by just summing up the greater challenges that I see in Sweden, that you will notice have a lot in common with the challenges that Norway, Denmark, Finland, Iceland also have. Possible reasons for why the gender stereotypes exist. And finally, I will talk about the implications of this. What can be done? What can we do to actually accomplish real change? I will also start off with an image of describing the gender segregation on our labor market. Here on the axis here you see the average wage, and on the axis down here you see the amount of women and men working in an industry. And when you look at where men are and where women are on the labor market, you can also see that there's a very strong correlation to the wage level, that women are focused on when it comes to healthcare, elderly care, childcare, school, retail, and they earn less than the average wage, whereas men who are in engineering, steel, paper, construction earn above the average wage. And this is, of course, a really big challenge. We also have a really strong connection between family and work life, that you can really see that once you have your first child, you see in statistics that there's sort of like an escalation of the implications of the gender stereotypes. You leave for maternity leave, the amount of unpaid labor that you do increases drastically. You start working part-time. You find it to get harder to get promoted because you're not as present at work as perhaps your male colleagues. You get a lower wage and you get a lower pension. And this correlation is extremely strong, and this is something that we're struggling with a lot to do something about. We have done quite a lot in Sweden when it comes to this area. We are gender mainstreaming all policy areas. The past 8 years, we have spent about 3 million euros on different measures when it comes to gender equality. We work quite hard with promoting gender equality in the labor market when it comes to encouraging students to make unstereotypical choices. We promote gender equality in schools. We have formulations in all curricula about gender equality and that it needs to be present in all types of activity in school. We have quotas for parental leave. Now we have 2 designated months for each parent. Hopefully we'll have more soon. We have flexible leave and working hours for parents. You actually have the right to work part-time, and you have the right to have flexible working hours. And we also have affordable and high-quality preschools, as has also been mentioned in the Norwegian case, but I also know that in the Finnish case it will focus a lot on preschools. We also work right now with formulating a policy and for a national strategy to get more men into preschools. But despite our efforts, we don't really see that much of a change. We do a lot in many areas, but still it's like we have a plateau and we're just waiting for, when it goes up really quickly, but it never seems to come because it's been like this for decades, regardless of the government. And I think that there are several reasons for this, and I've formulated myself a bit provocative just to inspire discussion afterwards, perhaps. The first one is identity politics, which we've already heard about here, which is about the internalization of norms that you reinforce your gender yourself. It becomes a part of who you are, which means that, and this is the second point, pure laziness, that the people in our society who benefit from this, they really need to make an effort to change. And it's quite hard because gender equality it's a matter of knowledge. It's not a matter of opinion, whether you think that you act in a gender equal way or not. You either do it or you don't. And to find out, you really need to challenge yourself. And by this I want to say that if you are in a very privileged position, maybe you don't see the point. Maybe you don't see the point in challenging yourself. And this is a big challenge. I also think that we have a very big challenge when it comes to different perceptions of reality. I actually brought with me today a really interesting article that's written by Marit Teigen, who's a Norwegian researcher at the Institute for Social Research in Oslo, and Lena Wegnerud at Gothenburg University. Here it is. It's called Tracing Gender Equality Cultures, Elite Perceptions of Gender Equality in Norway and Sweden. And the findings of this study is extremely important because it shows that what is perceived as a very radical reform in Sweden is not at all perceived as radical in Norway. And they present this argument as one of the reasons for why Norway can have more radical policy when it comes to parental leave, when it comes to quotas on corporate boards, for example, whereas when we try to do the same in Sweden, it's much harder because it's perceived as more radical. And this, of course, is connected to the perceptions of reality, how we perceive gender, how equal we are, which has also already been mentioned by other panelists, that if you already perceive yourself to live in a country where there's complete equality, why be inspired to change? The last point is lack of efficient policy. And I think we need to be really self-critical, those of us who work in politics, because it is really hard to formulate lack of efficient policy because you cannot legislate how people perceive themselves. You cannot legislate people to have higher knowledge of inequality in society. That is extremely, extremely difficult. And therefore, I think that the policy that we have worked with so far has not proved to be efficient enough. And I think maybe we need to find other ways. The implications of the stickiness, as I see them as gender stereotypes, is that I think that we need to start thinking in a completely different way. This is sort of a classical social science model of how we achieve change in society, and I think that it can be applied on gender policy as well. I would like to think, since I'm an optimist, that we are now at the bottom of this cycle, that we are in the crisis. The normal science, I would like to call society maybe 100 years ago, when we had clear-shaped norms of what a man should do and what a woman should do. And then the anomalies of these would be the women's movement, the questioning of this normal science. And now we have a crisis when we really realize, and maybe thanks to the financial crisis, that this is not a sustainable society. We need to do something more. And then, of course, we hope for the paradigm fail and that a new science, a new society will come about, that in which we live more as equals, of course. And I think a necessity to do this is maybe pushing for a coming gamification of policy design. And by this, I do not mean that gender equality should become like a Super Mario game, but I mean that maybe we should start looking at policy that encourages behavior in a bit more clear way. That when you share your parental leave, for example, maybe there should be a stronger incentive. Maybe immediately you should gain something. This is a method that's been very successful when it comes to changing consumers' behaviors. And by that, I do not mean that we should import the logic of consumerism into gender equality, but that it is something very basic about how we work as individuals, that we react in a positive way to rewards. And finally, I think maybe we need to revolutionize this. This is an image from a meeting between unions, employers, and legislators when they decided on how we should negotiate our salaries in Sweden. It was a very long time ago, and I think maybe we need to do something similar. We're looking to see if we can find maybe models of this to do this when it comes to gender equality as well, because it is not something that will come about just by itself. we need to have really strong engagement from all actors, and we really need to tie ourselves to the pole, like really try to force ourselves to achieve a change. And this is the way that we traditionally achieve change in the Nordic countries, by having meetings, talking about it, deliberating all the time. But maybe a meeting like this, but more modern, so to speak. And this was all that I was going to say. I hope that maybe we can continue this discussion on seeing that what comes ahead, and that we can all have a discussion about this later. Thank you very much.
I started out with referring to the Nordic model as a quality regarding gender equality, but even though the picture is different now, then most of the unions or the organization of the social partners in Iceland are headed by men. But we have few more women in academia and in politics than earlier. So let's hope that this picture will change very rapidly. And it has. The next speaker is from Finland. It's Sara Sundell. She will give us examples from work in kindergartens in Finland. And she is, her profession is, she works as a gender equality advisor at Folkehälsan, which is a social and healthcare organization in Finland.
In Finland, we also have very segregated labor market, as in the other northern countries. We are high in statistic in the whole of Europe. And it hasn't changed for many years. I think it's just gone down a few percent lately. So that's a big problem. We also, 15% of the women work part-time, so that's the lowest in the northern countries. But our problem is fixed time employment. About 18% of the women work fixed time, and many of the women who work part-time or fixed time nobody chooses, but also the part-time is, a lot of this is women who don't choose to work part-time. So we have challenges there, and the salary of the women is about 83% from the men, so we have a lot to do. I'm going to talk about how we can start breaking these gender norms in an early stage when the children are small. It's of course easiest to start early and then continue the work later on, because this can have an impact on how the children or young people choose studies and employment later on. I'm working with, I call it norm-critical gender equality work in preschools. We started the work in 2008, and normally we say in Finland that we are about 10 years behind Sweden, and in this case we were 13 years behind. But that's not only negative, because we had a lot to learn from Sweden, from their success and also from things that could be done in a different way. So I think we could manage in a short time to make a work that had a good impact. The main goal, of course, is to give equal rights, obligations, and opportunities for all children, regardless of their sex, as we have in gender equality work normally. But this is not the case in the kindergartens for the moment. So this has to be changed. About gender norms, we have to start with ourselves, because adults have often unconsciously different expectations, attitudes, and ways of treating children depending on the sex they think the children have. So most people in kindergartens that I've been working with say that, oh, here we just focus on the children and the best of the children, and we don't make any difference between the sexes. But then when you go in and really watch how they're doing it, we can see some patterns and really find out that they behave differently to girls and to boys. And I think the same is, of course, in people's homes. It's just not that easy to go with a video camera there. But the dominant gender norms in the society have a huge impact on the children and on what they choose for hobbies, how they express their gender, and all the expectations, and of course later on what they choose for employment and studies. It's always easier to follow the norms than to break the norms. And the norms are normally quite invisible. For example, heteronorm is very invisible until somebody says that I'm not heterosexual. So you have to break the norms quite visibly. The norms also are different. The gender norms have different values. The masculine norm is better valued, and I think that's why it's a little bit harder for boys to choose, for example, studies and workplaces that are stereotypically female and feminine. Because if a girl chooses something that is more masculine, she rises a little bit. But if a boy chooses something that is more feminine, he goes down on the status. So it's even harder that way. What we have done in our concrete work with the kindergartens are we had first a pilot project, and after that we are working with a lot of different kindergartens, preschools, whatever you want to call it. But the education is a crucial thing first, to educate the employees and also the parents. Inform the parents, but also educate them, because it's very important that they support this work at home and they understand why you are doing it. We have done observations, and the observations are of course, a lot has been done with video camera, how the interaction is made by the employees to the children, and there you can see a lot of things that you can change or do in a different way in the future. But you can also see good examples, of course, and it's through the good examples that you learn how to develop your work. But also the environment. It's about books. What kind of pictures are there in the books? What kind of works do girls, boys, men, women do? If we have very gender stereotypical books and toys, where are the toys placed? Do we have different corners for dolls and different rooms for cars? And can we mix them? Can we give the children more? The work is about giving more, not taking anything away, but just giving more opportunities, possibilities for the children. And that's the most important thing. But also to give the children more possibilities to develop different kind of how do you say it? To learn how to take care of other people, and to learn to sometimes think about what they want themselves, and to take more space, but also to see each other, respect each other, and for the employees to really see the children and not boys and girls. The thing is we have done it first to make the gender norms visible, then to deconstruct them and change the way of interacting and change the activity, and then of course evaluating it and continuing. This work never stops. You can never say that now we have reached gender equality. You have to continue all the time. What we have seen some patterns when we have filmed with video cameras and done other observations. We have seen that the employees have talked more to the girls, longer sentences. They have expected the girls to help out more and take care of themselves and also others more than the boys. They've helped the boys more, even if they didn't ask for help. For those of you who were yesterday listening to the ministers, the Swedish gender equality minister told some examples of this also. They gave the boys more space and attention and often spoke gender stereotypically. 2/3 of the books were about boys, and some toys were only used by boys or only by girls. And this, of course, we could change when we saw it and made the awareness of this. For the future, it's important, of course, that this work continues in schools, that you don't think you have to start early, you have to start in kindergartens, and then you stop. You have to continue in primary school, and then it's very important that laws and regulations provide support. This is crucial for this work because you can have some small projects here and there, but it has to come from here. And Sweden is a very good example of this. In Finland, we don't have it yet, but we would like to have gender equality plans, that it should be, that you should have to do them in all the schools and kindergartens. Also, the training of teachers and students are crucial, and also the employees in the kindergartens. So this is something you should work on this on all levels to get some good results. Yeah, and this, of course, in the long run, I think the way we behave with children when they are small, the way we are making differences in girls and boys, talking to girls a lot about how they look like, and when they help, we are giving them attention. And with the boys, we are giving them attention when they are strong, running fast, doing activities and these kind of things. And we help them without them asking for help even, and give them so much attention. I think in the long run, this has a huge impact on what kind of future these children have, what they choose for employment. And if we want to go into this segregation in the labor market, I think we have to start here. Thank you. I have this material with pictures of these norms. You can see them afterwards there.
Thank you, Sara. The work you're doing is very impressive. And I think now we have heard all the presentations, and I'm very proud of our organization that we had this perfect match, because in the content they were so different, and we had different angles of this huge problem all the Nordic countries face. So I'm sure you have some burning questions in the audience, and I want to invite all the experts to take seat here at the stage.
First, when you're talking about the long leave, legally speaking, we have a maternity leave, 14 weeks, reserved for the mother and the child. It's focused on the need to recovery after birth, but also focused on reserving the child's need to have one close contact person for that first important part of life. Then you have the parental leave, and time is ripe for having that shared between mother and father. We are just as good equal caring persons. And if that first part of the parental leave is reserved for the mother, talking about nursing, the parental leave and the maternity leave together, you have a child of 8 months, 8.5 months old, depending on the leave. This varies, I'm talking about the Norwegian context. So I think that is the reality, that I think it's important for the children to have fathers who know how to care and to bring that together. So I don't think a long parental leave is a hindrance for gender equality. It's not at all, but it has to be shared. When the comment from reform, I think I'll take that more as additional information, and I think important one that's shared. I don't have specific comment to that. When it comes to parents caring at home or mothers caring at home, I think that is, of course, if you can afford it, but it's also about showing the cost. What is the cost of staying at home, working part-time? Why do not the politicians make the possibility to sign in the annual tax report? This year, we have decided that the spouse and I, or the partner and I, will share the pension points, because the pension systems today, they are designed following one person. It is a very individualistic reality to the pension system. But it could have been possible to split up every year, saying, this year we share the pension points. Once a spouse says, no, I'm not giving my pension points to you, that would create some heated discussions around the dinner table. But it would certainly show the cost. So I'm not saying that we all should do the same thing. It's not. Very often people confront me when I was writing my PhD. Are you for or against part-time work? It's not that way. Part-time work is always an option in certain times of life, but you have to be aware of the costs. So I don't agree that it's a mechanical way of discussing. It's about responsibility, about showing the cost. Can you afford it? Can you not? And can the nation afford that people are staying at home? We heard yesterday, a lot of the welfare state's success is the contribution of women in work life. And a lot of the, what I call the muffins mom that won the discussion of one of the Norwegian newspapers this spring was really suppressing a discussion about the cost. So I'm not the person to ask about the statistics. I have a notion about that very often men will leave the professions they've started, but on the female professions, but I don't have the statistics.
Thank you for very interesting questions. Starting off with the parental leave, I think that if we were to design the system today, we would do it in a completely different way. I think that the parental leave design is a result of like an organic evolution that's evolved in several steps. And I think if we were to do it today, I'm quite convinced that we would make it completely individualized. But the problem is, or the problem for me as a politician is that not many people believe that that should be the case. In Sweden, and for the people who share my point of view, we have done not enough of a good job in convincing other people that this should be the case. And as long as that is the case, we will not change it and make those drastic changes, because we need support for the reforms that we're making. But I definitely think that it is too long, and we know that it is much longer in reality than the days that are assigned, because people do not take out full-time parental leave. They take 5 times a day, or they take part-time, and they spread it out over years. So in reality, the absence from the labor market is much, much higher than we see in the statistics. When it comes, and in that case, it's very interesting. In Sweden, you can share your pension points, but people don't do it because the pension system is too complicated, so nobody really knows about it. So we don't get those discussions, which is the subject of a panel of its own, but it's very interesting. When it also the kindergarten project, I've been to Oslo and I've studied how they work, and I think that it's definitely not that you do it that's the problem. It's of course how you do it, and you need to be very careful about how you do it. But I think that a challenge that you didn't bring up that I see in Norway is that you have lots of men who are not educated who work in preschool, and I think that you also need to have, sorry? And women, of course, and I think that that's an issue, and that's something that we need to take into account as well when talking about the gender segregation of the labor market, that it's also about competence. When it comes to the question about people choosing the wrong thing, that we're creating a society where people are very mechanical, I think that's an ideological point of view. I would argue that that's where we are today, that people are mechanical, that they don't make their own choices, that gender stereotypes are imposing themselves in a way that makes us unfree. But I think that's really a matter of opinion, and that's a question where we disagree. So maybe we can discuss that afterwards or in a different forum. But it's not something that I choose. It's not something that I forget to mention. It's that I don't think that it's not the basis of my conclusions. Statistics for men, we have it. We have a long report, and I'll be happy to email it to you.
Yes, I would like to start with discussing about the mothering. Actually, the intensive mothering is a concept in social theories that is quite interesting, and where the mother feels that she doesn't have a real choice. She has to just spend all her time on her babies, and actually this discourse is very class-based, and it's mainly like middle and upper class professional women that participate in this discourse. And in Iceland, actually, this discourse has not gained a huge admire, because women in Iceland, work as much as Norwegian males. We have a very, very high participation of women in the labor market, as high as I said, as men in Norway. And the reasons, I think I can trace to, for example, to the parental leave. It has changed the meaning of being a man in Iceland, especially for the middle and upper class men. They take paternal leave, and you can see, men with their children, very young children, walking on the streets in Reykjavik, which you didn't see much before. I think also it's a lack of religious belief in Iceland, because this intensive mothering is sometimes very much related to religion. And then in the third perspective, I think Iceland is quite young in their middle classness, because like 40 years ago, almost everyone was working class. And we were colonized by Denmark for for centuries, and so we have this work ethics of working class people, and also for the females. So I think this has freed us from some sort of intensive mothering, sort of. That's a strange thing to say, but these 3 points I would like to make: religion, short history of middle classness, and paternal leaves. And think about care as something we can trace to some sort of intelligence. You know, intelligent people go into care sectors. And because we have an extremely narrow concept of intelligence, which is very, very, what can I say, male-dominated. All the geniuses we have, or we think we have, are males, mostly. And then we have to change structures, concepts, and our beliefs, not only counting heads of females and males. That's, I agree with you about that. And we have too mechanical view of being human. I do agree with you about that, because we have to create a society of care, and we do it by changing our views of what it means to be intelligent, what it means to be a good person and a great person and achieving person. About the statistics, you know, of course, we have statistics in Iceland that more males than females that go into the care sectors go into some sort of leadership jobs. And I think it's also because not always that the men are eager to go into that. It's also because, you know, all the surroundings, both women and men, push them into that direction because they have to distance from the care, as I was discussing before. They have to make some sort of distance from the care work within the profession. Yeah, and there is a higher dropout rate among nursing male students than nursing female students. Okay.
Thank you. And Nana?
Yes, in Denmark we have just had this big discussion about parental leave because the Danish government put out, when they came to power in Denmark, they had like sayings that now we're going to change the system regard the one there is in Iceland, Sweden and Norway, where there are more men participating in parental leave. And then everything fell apart. Nothing happened. And now we are back as what we could call the Danish model, where mothers take about a year of leave. And that has a huge impact on their career and on their wages and on their pension. So I think it's a big problem that we have a society in Denmark where we favor the men and kind of also favor the women, but both in two different directions. One is favored to have the good working career and achievements, and the woman is favored in part of having time with the child. I think that the right model is making, when the state is financing, and that's what it happens in Denmark, then of course there should be for both parents equally. I think it's very, like Helga said in the start, of course the first 14 weeks, yes, of course, there should be for the mother because there is also a lot of stuff going on and she has to recover from the birth. But afterwards you have to make both parents equal. Boys and men are bigger dropouts of the educational system in Denmark all over. But when it comes to the social and healthcare sector, they are managing quite well. I think it's a good impact on them. They are the other gender. And some years ago, I think it's 4 or 5 years ago, there was a big research made when they combined, compared, yeah, sure. Compared the social and healthcare workers and the electricians. Looked at women going in to be electrician and men going into the social and healthcare sector. And it was really different how it worked. It was so hard for the women. They have to change. Actually, they have to leave their gender outside the door. They have to go on being nothing because there was a big, everybody was talking about were they physical strong enough, could they manage, were they able to. But it was totally the other way around, looking at the boys going into the sector that I work with. They were oh, he's so good, look, he can do all this, he's so clever. I mean, they were really carried away by the whole sector. Everybody loved them. And many of them went on to have leadership jobs afterwards, and it's still going on that way. And I think we have to then look at it's kind of okay that they want this leadership job. I don't think we should say, no, it's not good for you, but I also agree that it's a way of making a little move away back from all the caring and showing off that you are something else. And that's something that we should look on. Yeah, I think that's
Okay, shortly on the maternal leave, I think this Icelandic model is quite a good solution. We are talking about it in Finland now to change it to 6 months for the mother, 6 months for the father or the partner, if there's 2 mothers or fathers, and 6 months for either one, so that's optional. And I don't know if this is going to go through, but I hope so. About this forcing gender norms and changing them for children, as I see it, we are now forcing gender norms to the children. We are giving girls this and boys this. And the thing we are doing is open up these boxes and letting the children choose. We are not going to change it so that we are doing the other way around. We are just questioning the norms. And I am very glad that we have done it also in the past, because otherwise I don't think either of us, most of us women, wouldn't be sitting here today if we wouldn't have questioned the norms for women, for example, in the history. We would be at home now taking care of children, and we wouldn't be able to be educated and all that. So I think that's it's not wrong if some people choose very gender stereotypically, and it should never be wrong, but it's wrong if it's a pattern and the structures are making it so much easier to choose stereotypically. Then we are not giving real choices to the children. So I think that's the thing. And then I just would like to talk about this men in kindergarten. I think it's very important that we have men and women, but I also think it's very important that we have different kind of people who are taking care of the children, that we don't see women as a group all the same and men as a group all the same, because it's very important how we are with the children. If we... Oh, is my time up?
No.
Good way. If we say something to the children, that you can have all the possibilities to do this and that, and then we ourselves as employees, for example, or parents, are doing things very gender stereotypically, the children will see what we are doing and not what we are saying. For example, I was attending a seminar in Sweden with 200 employees in kindergarten and decisionals, and then somebody raised the question that it's very hard for girls in kindergartens to have short hair. And then I looked around and said, I'm not surprised, because there are 200 Swedish women here with long hair. 2 persons have short hair. One is from Finland and one from Denmark. So it's, of course, about how we look and how we act that also matters, not only their gender.
So, thank you all. And I want to thank you all for attending this event, the American Scandinavian Foundation, for co-hosting it with us. We want to invite you all to a light refreshment after the event, but I would like to ask you to stay for 10 minutes because we want to show you a new film produced by the Nordic Council of Ministers in the celebration of the 40th of the jubileum of the 40th anniversary of Nordic cooperation in the field of gender equality. Thank you all.